Good morning. We are on record. The time's 10:11 a.m. on July 16th, 2015. Here begins media number 1 of the deposition of Brian Wheeler in the matter of Silva versus County of Kern. This case is in the United States District Court, Central District of California, and the case number is 1:13-CB-01051-LJO-JLT. This deposition is taking place at Chain Cone Styles in Bakersfield, California, and is being taken on behalf of the plaintiffs. The videographer is Sarah Randall with the court reporter Susan Wood, appearing for Wood and Randall Certified Shorthand Reporters. Would counsel please identify yourselves and state whom you represent, beginning with plaintiff's counsel.
Thomas Seabaugh from the law offices of Dale Gallipo. I represent plaintiffs MLS, CJS, CRS, EZS, Mary Silva, Salvador Silva, and Chris Silva.
Neil Gelawat, Chain Cone Styles, on behalf of the same plaintiffs.
John Teo, Rodriguez and Associates, on behalf of plaintiff Tara Garlick and Garlick versus County of Kern, and also on behalf of the Arrieta plaintiffs in the companion case of Arrieta versus County of Kern.
Edward Wolf of the Office of the Attorney General for Highway Patrol Officers Michael Phillips and Michael Bright.
Brandy Gustafson from Weekly and Art on behalf of Sergeant Douglas Sword, Deputy Jeff Kelly, and Deputy Luis Almanza.
I'm Scott Fontes from the Office of County Counsel. I represent County of Kern, Donnie Youngblood, Ryan Greer, Tanner Miller, David Stevens, and Brian Brock as defendants in the Silva matter.
Would the reporter please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Could you please state and spell your full name, please?
Brian Lloyd Wheeler, BRIAN LLOYD WHEELER.
Have you ever had your deposition taken before?
I don't believe so.
Have you ever testified in court before?
Yes.
About how many times?
A lot.
Would that mostly be in your capacity as a law enforcement officer?
Yes.
You understand you have a duty to tell the truth today?
Yes.
You understand the oath you just took is the same oath you would take if you're testifying in court before a judge or jury?
Yes.
If you don't understand a question today, will you let me know?
Yes.
If you understand we can take a break at any time?
Yes.
I also understand you're expecting some happy news today.
Yes.
You understand that if you get some happy news in that happy event, we will adjourn and let you go to your family.
Great, thank you.
But we do have an understanding that if we do that, that you'll come back and answer the rest of the questions some other time, whether it's before or after the discovery cutoff.
Yeah, if for some reason we have to conclude abruptly today, we will make them available for further deposition, whether it's before or after the cutoff.
Okay. You understand the court reporter will be preparing a transcript of this deposition?
Yes.
So because of that, it's important that we don't talk over each other and we both speak slowly and clearly so that she can take everything down.
Okay.
You understand you'll have a chance to review and make corrections to the transcript after it's been prepared.
Okay.
But any corrections you make may be commented on by an attorney before a judge and jury and could affect your credibility. You understand that?
Okay.
So it's in your best interest to give us your best testimony today. You understand that?
Yes.
Any reason why we should not go forward with the deposition other than the family circumstances we already talked about?
No.
When did you first become a law enforcement officer?
I graduated the academy in May 8th of 1990. Started the academy January 16th, same year. So.
And have you been with the Kern County Sheriff's Office ever since 1990?
Yes.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1985.
Did you attend any college or university?
Yes.
Did you obtain any degrees?
Later.
What degrees do you hold?
I have a bachelor's in criminal justice administration with a focus on management.
Any other higher diplomas or degrees?
No.
What's your current rank at the Kearney County Sheriff's Office?
Chief Deputy?
And where is that on the chain of command in terms of the, that's one of the highest ranks?
Yes, the sheriff is the highest. The undersheriff is under the sheriff, and then there are 4 chief deputies.
And obviously that rank carries with it some leadership responsibilities.
Yes.
What specifically are your leadership responsibilities?
Currently, I'm signed to the Law Enforcement Bureau.
And what does that assignment involve?
Daily management and oversight of all the law enforcement operations as far as patrol within the sheriff's office.
You understand you're here today, and we're going to be talking about the in-custody death of David Silva, which took place in May 2013.
Yes.
And you understand you're here today to answer on behalf of the County of Kern and its Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
So in other words, I'm not asking you for your personal knowledge or beliefs. I'm basically asking you for the response of the County of Kern to the questions I'm asking. Understand that?
Okay.
And you've been designated by the County of Kern to answer on its behalf with respect to a number of subject matters or topics. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm putting in front of you what the court reporter has marked as Exhibit 9. This is a, you see on the front page it says, Notice of Continued Deposition of County of Kern. You
Yes.
see where it says that? And you see on the bottom where the court reporter has put Exhibit 9.
Yes.
I have extra copies for everyone if anybody needs a copy. Okay. You'll turn to page 4 of that document. See where it says Attachment A at the top of the page?
Yes.
And then going on to the next page, there are various paragraphs numbered 1 through 13, or sorry, 1 through 14.
See where he's at? He's talking about both pages, starting here with 1
Okay.
and then going to 14.
Yes.
Have you seen this document before?
Yes.
Have you seen these topics before?
Yes.
And you understand you've been designated by the County of Kern to testify about topics 1 through 14 on this document?
Yes.
And you're knowledgeable on each of these designated topics?
Yes.
What did you do to prepare for your deposition today?
I reviewed the folder that was provided regarding the incident. I reviewed this. I spoke with Mr. Fontes.
What was in the folder that you reviewed? Which document specifically?
The police reports, the toxicology report, the coroner's report, and that was the gist of it, the information that was put together during the case.
Did you bring any documents together with you today?
No.
If you turn to page 6 of the document in front of you, you see where it says Attachment B at the top of the page?
Yes.
And you understand that these are various categories of documents that we requested be produced at the deposition today?
Yes.
But just for the record, you haven't brought any documents today.
It's asked and answered. And for the record, there are no documents responsive to categories 1 through 3.
Okay, I'll withdraw the question. Turning back to page 4. You have page 4 in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. The County of Kern investigated the in-custody death of David Silva, is that right?
Yes.
And in the course of that investigation, it gathered evidence,
Yes.
spoke to witnesses,
Yes.
and the individuals involved in or assigned to the investigation documented the evidence that they'd gathered.
Yes.
And once the evidence had been gathered, it was submitted up the chain of command, is that right?
Spade, go ahead and answer if you understand the question.
Could you clarify?
Were any findings made with respect to the County of Kern's investigation?
No.
Did the County of Kern make any findings as to whether the conduct of its officers was within or not within policy?
No.
Who is the final policymaker or person with final policymaking authority for the County of Kern
It's vague. I'm sorry, go
with
ahead.
respect to the in-custody death of David Silva?
It's vague and also calls for a legal conclusion, but you may answer.
Can you clarify?
The County of Kern has policies in place governing the conduct of its police officers and deputies, is that right?
Yes.
And who is responsible for promulgating those policies?
It's vague and overbroad, but go ahead and answer.
In what context?
Because who is the final decider in terms of what the policy is?
Again, it's
Who
vague.
makes that decision?
It's vague and overbroad, but you may answer.
Are you asking who creates policy or who determines whether or not a policy has been violated?
Well, let me ask you both questions, starting with the first. So who is responsible for implementing the policy?
It's vague, overbroad. Go ahead and answer them.
Well, managers and supervisors are responsible for implementing policy.
When a new written policy is put into effect, who is responsible for, let me just ask it this way, what's the process for implementing a new policy?
Again, it's vague and overbroad, but go ahead and answer to the extent you're able to.
It really depends on the policy. But generally, if there's a new procedure that's being adopted, or if a policy needs to be updated, a lot of times that can start at a lower level, like at a commander lieutenant level. Ultimately, that draft policy is created. It goes through several different reviews with council and others, and then makes it up to the chiefs and the undersheriff who review it and ultimately decide if that policy is going into effect. I'm sure the undersheriff probably covers that with the sheriff. I'm not positive on that. She would have the authority to enact policy, but it's a collective effort at that point.
So the Kern County Sheriff's Office's top leaders have collective authority to implement a policy, is that right?
It's vague and ambiguous as to top leaders, but you may answer the question if you understand it.
We all have input on a policy.
But what is the event? What has to happen? Let me withdraw that, start over so it's clear. In terms of the process that you just described, what are the necessary steps for a new policy to go into effect?
Again, it's vague and overbroad, but you may answer.
It really varies on the situation. For example, if we are deploying a new piece of equipment that requires a policy to talk about that, that has to go through a process. Somebody's got to write that policy. We have to, have it reviewed by council to make sure that, the policy is sound. If it results with something that requires training has to be written associated with it. Ultimately, it comes to we call it a policy review committee, that we sit down and we review the policy and we decide whether or not the policy is good. There's also a meet and confer process that goes into that with the unions if it affects their employment.
Did you say that there was a policy review committee that sometimes meets?
It's not really a formal committee, it's the chiefs. We get together usually with the human resources commander and go over the policy. Any proposed policy, new policy, or policy changes.
When this policy review committee meets, who is on that committee?
The human resources commander. Usually the undersheriff is there. If not, we have met without the undersheriff, but it's the chiefs, chief deputies.
Who would have authority to rescind the policy?
The undersheriff or the sheriff.
Okay, now let's talk about the second part of the question we talked about earlier, and that's how do you make a determination as to whether a policy has been violated?
Again, it's vague and it's overbroad, but you may answer if you're able to.
Again, it varies by situation. We can receive an allegation of a policy being violated through the complaint process, where a citizen complains, or whether or not a supervisor recognizes a potential policy violation by one of his subordinates, or it's reported by someone else. That then goes through the discipline process, which ultimately lands at a discipline review board. The discipline review board, well, I'm sorry, before it goes to that level, it goes through a first review process where the chief deputy and the commander over that employee review the facts of the case together, determine what they believe which policies are violated. Then they issue findings, one of 4 findings on each alleged policy violation, either sustained, not sustained, exonerated, or unfounded. If there's any sustained policy violation at that point, then it moves to a discipline review board. The discipline review board then decides what discipline will be handed out regarding that particular policy.
And is the discipline review board does the discipline review board have the final say in terms of whether a policy has been violated?
No.
Again, it's vague and overbroad, but go ahead and answer. And yes.
The answer was no.
Sorry. The answer is no. The sheriff can always overturn the discipline review board.
Okay. Presumably, once the sheriff has weighed in, the sheriff has the final say. Is that right?
Yes.
Again, it's vague and ambiguous and overbroad, but he's answered.
With respect to this case, meaning the in-custody death of David Silva, was there ever anything like a complaint process that you described just now?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Was there ever a complaint or process initiated by a supervisor as you just described?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did anything ever go before a discipline review board in this case?
No.
And so obviously a discipline review board never made any findings, but in this case with respect to whether any policies had been violated.
Correct.
And the chief never made any findings or recommendations in terms of whether the conduct of any of the deputies had been inside or outside policy. Is that right?
Can you clarify that? We have 4 chiefs.
Okay, but who, just so we have the record, who are the 4 chiefs
Now or at the time of the incident?
at the time of the incident?
At the time of the incident, Chief Deputy Kevin Zimmerman, myself, Chief Deputy Shelley Castaneda, and Chief Deputy Francis Moore.
Can you spell Castaneda for the record?
Castaneda.
And none of those 4 chiefs made any findings or recommendations with respect to the conduct of the deputies in this case?
No.
What is Donnie Youngblood's rank?
He's the sheriff.
And did he ever make any findings or recommendations with respect to whether the conduct of the deputies in this case had been within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's all right. I didn't hear the entire question, but he's answered it. Go ahead.
Sheriff Youngblood appeared at some press conferences in connection with this case, is that right?
Yes.
And at the press conference he said, didn't he, that the conduct of the officers was within policy?
Well, that assumes facts, argumentative.
I don't recall.
I propose a 5-minute break. I just want to get one document.
Going off record, it's 10:31 a.m. Back on record, it's 10:39 a.m.
Okay. Sorry about that. Short break. I'm handing you a document where I put the number 10 at the bottom. And I have a copy for myself, a copy for you, and this is the other copy I have. I'm afraid we're just going to have to
First.
have everyone share it. These are different. I think we just have 3 each. Well, I'm starting with this one.
They're looking at
This is different. This is different. No, they're all different. You should look at this and tell me if there's anything.
Is that the transcript?
I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
No,
it appears to be.
Start with good afternoon.
This is the transcript. No,
That's not what you've given me.
no, I haven't.
Okay.
I gave him this, starting with this one.
Oh, okay.
So you have extra copies?
Oh,
Yeah, we
yeah,
do
no,
have
these are,
copies.
there they are. That's more.
Can we go off record and have copies of this made?
It is.
I think we do have copies of everyone now.
This is his copy, and I'd like one for my own
I think
edification while you're questioning him on it.
Okay.
We'll go off the record.
Off record, it's 10:41
Thank you.
a.m.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think we do have copies for everyone, but maybe I'm just getting everything
Yeah, he's
confused.
just.
Back on record, it's 10:53 a.m.
Okay, I'm sorry about the confusion, but now, as I understand it, you have 3 documents in front of you. Is that right?
Yes.
One has been marked Exhibit 10, 111, 112. Is that right?
I have one marked 10. The second one has no marking, and the third one has no marking.
Okay. Let's turn to the one that is titled Sheriff Defends Deputy's Conduct, Says Silva's Death Accidental. Do you see the document where it says that at the top of the page?
Yes, sir.
Can I have the court reporter please mark that as Exhibit 11? Okay, I'll ask you to turn to page 2 of that document. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And the third paragraph down from the top begins, in addition. Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
That sentence reads, in addition, deputies never struck Silva in the head or neck. The findings of the Sheriff's Department were that 3 deputies struck Silva and they hit him in areas that policy allows them to strike. Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
But as I understand your testimony today, the Sheriff's Department never actually made any findings as to what had happened in the incident. Is that right?
Yes.
And they also never made any determinations as to what conduct was inside or outside of policy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, let's turn to Exhibit 12. Or the document we're going to mark as Exhibit 12. I'm sorry. The document has, at the top of the first page, transcript of Sheriff Donnie Youngblood's May 23rd news conference. Do you have that document in front of you?
Yes.
Would you please hand it to the court reporter so she can mark it as Exhibit 12? Do you have Exhibit 12 in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Could you please turn to page 7? you have page 7 in front of you?
I have a page that's labeled 7/8 at the bottom.
Do you see towards the middle of the page in italics, it says reporter, the call this morning for an oversight committee into these matters for the community. What's your take on that? Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
And then Youngblood responds, that's a great question, but I will tell you, this case personifies exactly why a citizen review board is not a good idea. I, as the sheriff or the chief of police, we deal in facts, we deal in law, and we deal in policy. Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
Do you know what facts he was referring to when he made that statement?
Well, it lacks foundation, calls for speculation, assumes facts, but go ahead and answer if you're able to.
It appears to be a general statement by the sheriff, so I couldn't say what facts he's referring to in the way that question is asked and the way he's answered.
Turning back to the document we marked as Exhibit 9 that had the subject matters of testimony on that. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, let me just go through some of these subject matters on page 4 just so we're clear. Your testimony today is that there were no findings in the County of Kern's investigation into the in-custody death of David Silva. Is that correct?
That's vague. Go ahead and answer.
Is that correct?
Can you clarify, please?
Well, the question is, I'm sorry, I'm going to need to take a drink of water. Can we go off record for just a moment?
Off record, it's 10:58 a.m.
Sorry, I lost the cough.
Back on record, it's 10:59 a.m.
On number 6, did any final policymaker or person with final policy making authority make any approval or disapproval of the conduct of any of the deputies involved in the incident with David Silva?
It's vague, it's overbroad, calls for legal conclusion. You can go ahead and answer if you're able to.
Not that I'm aware of.
Let me ask it this way. Did the County of Kern approve or disapprove of any of the conduct of any of the deputies involved in the incident with David Silva?
Again, it's vague and overbroad, but you may answer.
Not that I'm aware of.
Did the County of Kern make any determination as to whether the use of batons against David Silva was within or not within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
The County of Kern didn't make any determination, did it, as to whether the use of force against David Silva was within or not within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
The County of Kern didn't make any determination as to whether the use of the hobble restraint was within or not within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
The County of Kern didn't make any determination as to whether the use of a spit sock was within or not within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
The deputies involved in the in-custody death of David Silva were acting in their capacity as law enforcement officers during the incident, is that right?
Yes.
They were acting in their official capacity as deputies or employees of the Kern County Sheriff's Office, is that right?
Yes.
And that would include deputies Douglas, or deputies or employees, Sergeant in this case, Douglas Sword, Ryan Greer, Tanner Miller, Jeffrey Kelly, Luis Almanza, Brian Brock, and David Stevens, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I have one last exhibit, which I'd like to ask you about. Let me ask a few preliminary questions, and if it's necessary, we'll make copies for everyone. It's a 138-page document. So, before I mark it as an exhibit, I'm going to hand you a document. This document says Incident Investigation Report at the top of the first page. You see where it says that?
Yes.
And on the bottom right-hand corner, it says page 1 of 38.
Page 1 of 138.
Yes. Is this a document that you've seen before?
This specific document or one similar?
Well, first let me ask you about this specific document. Is this specifically a document you've seen before?
This is what our reports look like.
You see at the top of the page where it says case number SR 13-12817?
Yes.
And that is a case number that would be unique to each particular case. No
Yes.
two reports would have the same case number.
It's vague. Go ahead and answer.
Yes.
And this is the incident investigation report in the incident involving David Silva, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with respect to this specific document, have you seen this document before?
Again, I would have to compare this to what I was given, I mean, page by page, to make sure that it's exactly the same as what I looked at.
Does this appear to be the document that you reviewed in preparation for your, or one of the documents you reviewed in preparation for your deposition today?
It appears to be our reports on it. I don't know that they're all here, obviously, without going through all 138 pages.
Okay. Let's go off record.
Going off record, it's 11:04 and.
The problem we're having is that when these are printed out.
That's all right.
Back on record, it's 11:24 and.
Okay. Chief Wheeler, you understand you're still under oath?
Yes.
And during the break, did you have a chance to look at some of this document we've marked as Exhibit 13?
Yes, sir.
And did anything jump out at you as being inconsistent with or different from any other version of this document you might have seen?
No.
Okay. Some force was used to take Mr. Silva into custody, is that right?
Yes.
And there were baton strikes used by some of the deputies?
Yes.
Also, there were some dog bites.
Yes.
Various witnesses gave various statements about what had happened during the incident. Is that true?
Yes.
Mr. Silva at some point was handcuffed. Is that right?
Yes.
At some point a hobble was put on.
Yes.
The hobble was connected to the handcuffs.
Yes.
If you turn to page 11 of this document, Officer Bright was the one who first applied the hobble restraint to Mr. Silva's legs. Is that right?
Let me just make an objection. It lacks foundation. The document speaks for itself. He can answer it.
Are you referring to paragraph 5?
That's right.
According to this particular report, the way I read it, it says that he attempted to place the hobble and he was able to get it around one leg and then passed it to the deputy who was trying to hold Silva's legs. That deputy was then able to apply it.
Do you know which deputy that was?
I don't recall.
Did the County of Kern ever make any finding as to which deputy that was?
I don't recall.
Are you saying I don't recall because that's information that you may have had at some point?
I don't remember if we made a determination of who that deputy was, as I sit here right now.
What would you need to do to find out which deputy that was?
I would have to go back through the individual interviews with the deputies and see if it's stated in there. What I'm saying is I may have read that at one point, but I don't remember if I read that right now to tell you.
Did the County of Kern ever make a determination as to which officer had connected the hobble to the handcuffs?
Yes.
Which deputy or officer was that?
I don't recall. I'd have to go back through the report interviews and find that.
Did the County of Kern ever make a determination as to whether connecting the hobble to the handcuffs under those circumstances was within policy or not?
It's
No.
vague, overbroad, but he's answered.
I'll ask you to turn to page 25 of this document. The third paragraph down, you see where it begins, Deputy Stevens estimated?
Yes.
Mr. Silva stopped screaming and moving approximately a minute after the hobble was placed on, is that right?
Black's foundation. Calls for speculation. Document speaks for itself. You may answer.
According to this interview, I would say that's Deputy Stevens, his perception of what occurred at that time.
Did the County of Kern ever make any finding as to how long Mr. Silva was on his stomach after he'd been hobbled?
No.
Isn't it the Kern County's policy that after somebody is hobbled, they should be immediately turned onto their side?
I'd have to refer to that policy, if you can refer me to the policy to know exactly what it says.
I'm putting a 14 at the bottom of what I will offer as Exhibit 14. And so I just have one extra copy of this. This is I'm going to represent to you, this is identical to the F-350 policy that we've talked about in previous depositions. Do you have that document in front of you?
Yes.
If you look at the fourth paragraph down, do you see where it begins, occasionally officers?
Yes.
The policy is, quote, occasionally officers may encounter a particularly violent person who continues to fight and resist even after his or her hands are appropriately restrained. There are a number of reasons for behavior of this nature. However, it is most typically related to drug-influenced mental illness or a medical condition. In any case, restraining the person while he or she is in a face-down prone position can inhibit their ability to breathe effectively, unquote. Isn't that the policy?
Well, first of all, the document speaks for itself. Second of all, this is now getting outside the scope of this witness's testimony. And there's already been testimony by a person most knowledgeable on policy, so I'm going to instruct him not to answer that question. If you want to tie it into one of the topics that he's been designated to testify to, I'll reconsider, but you've already deposed someone on this particular issue, and that's not his area.
Let me ask it this way. Looking at Stevens's statement summarized on page 25 of Exhibit 13, nobody ever determined whether Stevens's conduct was consistent with the F-350 policy or not. Isn't that true?
It's vague, ambiguous, and overbroad, but you may answer that question.
Can you repeat that, please?
Okay, maybe I'll break it down. So Stevens says on page 25 that he estimated that Mr. Silva stopped screaming and moving approximately a minute after the hobble was placed on him, and that he was on his stomach when he stopped resisting and yelling. Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
Now, my question is, did the County of Kern ever determine whether his conduct was consistent or not consistent with F-350?
No.
ask you to turn to page 56 of this document. Okay, second paragraph from the bottom. You see there's a paragraph that begins, Jessie asked Land to tell her again. You see where it says that?
Yes.
Jason Land was allegedly a witness to part of the encounter with Mr. Silva, is that right?
It appears, reading the lead into the report, that he was being interviewed by a news reporter as a witness.
Did Kern County Sheriff's Office deputies or detectives ever interview him about what he observed in the incident?
Black's Foundation. You may call for speculation. Go ahead and answer if you know.
I don't know.
At any rate, someone from the Kern County Sheriff's Office summarized his statement to a news reporter and included it in the incident or investigation report.
Same objections. Go ahead and answer if you're able.
Based on reading this report, the reporting officer says that he was present during an interview between a reporter and Land, and that he's taking statements from that interview.
Okay, and that statement from Land is included or summarized in the incident investigation report that's in front of you?
And
Yes.
at Black's Foundation, he can answer.
That's your understanding, at least?
Yes.
Land states, quote, "We see one officer and a canine dog with a man face down begging for his life." You see where it says that?
Yes.
And Land says, or your understanding is that Land says that the dog was biting the man's leg and the deputy had his knee on the man's neck. Do you see where it says that?
Yes.
The Kern County Sheriff's Office and the County of Kern never actually made the determination as to whether what Land said was true or not.
Can you repeat that?
Let me strike that and ask it a different way. The County of Kern never made a determination as to whether any of what Land said was true. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you never determined whether the deputies, quote, beat him till he stopped moving, unquote, as Land described it.
Assumes facts overbroad. Vague. Go ahead and answer if you're able.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The County of Kern never made a determination as to whether the deputies beat Mr. Silva until he stopped moving.
Same objections. Go ahead and answer if you're able.
No.
And they never made a determination as to whether the deputies grabbed their back's pole or whatever you call it and beat the man till they killed him.
It's vague. It's ambiguous. Black's Foundation. Go ahead and answer if you're able to.
Can you repeat that? Which part are you referring to?
Referring to the last sentence in that second paragraph from the bottom on page 56.
Okay, I see that.
And the deputies never investigated whether that was true. Or I'm sorry, I withdraw that question. Let me move on. Let me turn to page 61. Your understanding is that one witness to the incident is Ruben Ceballos. Is that right?
Lacks foundation, calls for speculation. You may answer though.
According to this report, he claims he was a witness.
He claimed, didn't he, that he was awakened by the sound of a baton hitting Mr. Silva's head.
Same objection. Document speaks for itself. Yeah, sorry, you may answer.
If you're referring to the, looks about the third paragraph under details, he makes several statements, and one of them includes he was awakened by the sound of a baton hitting the subject's head.
Did the County of Kern, strike that. The County of Kern didn't make any determination as to whether Mr. Silva was struck in the head with a baton. Isn't that true?
It's vague and overbroad. Go ahead and answer if you're able.
When you're referring to County of Kern in this case, are we talking as the sheriff's administration?
That, yeah, the County of Kern would include the Kern County Sheriff's Office.
Still vague and overbroad. If you understand the question, go ahead and answer.
I'm not clear on the question.
Did the County of Kern or its Sheriff's Office ever make a determination as to whether Mr. Silva had been struck in the head with a baton?
Same objections. You may answer it if you understand the question.
Based on my review of the coroner's report, there was no evidence of baton strikes to the head.
Well, a witness says on page 61, doesn't he, that Mr. Silva was struck in the head with a baton?
It's argumentative and the document speaks for itself. It also lacks foundation and calls for speculation. You may answer.
According to this statement given by this witness, he claims that.
But did the County of Kern's investigations ever result in a finding one way or the other as to whether Mr. Silva had been struck in the head with a baton?
Okay, again, it's vague and ambiguous and overbroad, but go ahead and answer if you're able to. It's also asked and answered. Go ahead.
I've already stated before we didn't come to a finding on this case.
Okay. And then the County of Kern never determined as to whether the baton strikes were inside or outside of policy,
I think it's asked and answered.
including any baton strikes to the head.
It's been asked and answered, but you may answer it again. Go ahead.
Can you repeat that, please?
I think we can have it read back.
And then the County of Kern never determined as to whether the baton strikes were inside or outside of policy, including the baton strikes to the head.
I'm not aware that we have evidence that there were baton strikes to the head.
Isn't a witness statement that he observed batons hitting the subject's head evidence that he was struck in the head with a baton?
Sorry.
Objection misstates the document.
It's also argumentative, but you may answer if able.
Certainly, a witness statement could be considered oral evidence in any case. However, there are multiple forms of evidence, and people can claim a lot of different things, but in this case, it was not supported by the coroner's findings.
So the County of Kern disagrees in its findings. Withdraw that. Has the County of Kern ever made a determination as to whether the conduct of any of its deputies was within policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, it's vague and overbroad. Are we talking about this case or ever in the history of the county on any case?
This particular question is ever about the history of the county in any case.
All right. Did you understand it to be that?
Could you repeat it then? No, I did not understand it.
With respect to the County of Kern, has it ever, in any case, not just including this case, made a determination that an officer or deputy's conduct was inside or outside policy?
Okay, first, let me make the record. First of all, it's vague, it's ambiguous, and it's overbroad. It's not relevant or reasonably calculated to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence. And it's also outside the scope of the topics on which this gentleman was designated as person most knowledgeable, but he's answered the question, so go ahead.
Why didn't the County of Kern make any findings in this case as to whether the officer's conduct was within or not within policy?
Okay, it's argumentative, lacks foundation, outside scope of the deposition. I'll let him answer it, though, if you're able to.
I'd have to speculate on an answer.
Number 14, in terms of the, referring back to the notice of continued deposition, which is Exhibit 9. And I'm looking specifically at page 5 at the top of the page.
Do you have it?
9, you said?
I'm sorry. Where are you, counsel? Did you say 9?
I'm on Exhibit 9, page 5,
Okay.
top of page number 14.
Thank you.
Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
What were the reasons, let me ask this, were any of the County of Kern's employees involved in the in-custody death of David Silva retrained after the incident?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were they reprimanded?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were any of them disciplined?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were any of them terminated?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why not?
It's argumentative, lacks foundation, assumes facts. Go ahead and answer if you're able to.
Is your question in relation to this incident?
Yes.
Can you repeat that, please?
May I have you read it back?
Well, the last question was why not? Question, were any of them terminated? Answer, not that I'm aware of. Question, why not?
I don't believe there were grounds to terminate anyone, discipline them.
Would grounds to reprimand or discipline an officer include violations of policy?
Yes.
But with respect to Douglas Sword, Ryan Greer, Tanner Miller, Jeffrey Kelly, Luis Almanza, Brian Brock, and David Stevens, no determination was ever made as to whether their conduct violated policy or not.
It's asked and answered. Go ahead. You may answer it again.
Correct.
If they had violated policy, would reprimands or discipline have been appropriate?
It's vague, it's overbroad, it lacks foundation, it calls for speculation, and it's outside the scope of the deposition topics on which this particular witness is testifying. I'll allow you to answer this, but I'm not going to let you go far on this line of questioning. It's a yes or no, if you can.
Can you repeat the question, please?
If they had violated policy, would reprimands or discipline have been appropriate?
I can't answer that question. It varies.
Who has the final authority to reprimand or discipline officers if they are found to have violated policy?
It's overbroad, it's vague. Go ahead and answer if you're able to.
Again, as I stated earlier, it would go through the discipline process, which includes a chief deputy and a commander making recommendations as to which policies were violated, and then it goes to a discipline review board, at which point discipline is then decided upon, and then from there it would go to the sheriff for, if the person choose to appeal it to the sheriff.
Why didn't this incident wind up with the discipline review board?
It lacks foundation, it's overbroad, calls for speculation. Go ahead and answer if you're able to.
In order for something to get to a discipline review board, there would have to be an allegation of a violated policy.
And as far as the Kern County Sheriff's Office is concerned, there's no allegation that there was a violated policy in this case?
Again, it's overbroad, lacks foundation. Go ahead and answer if you're able to.
I'm not aware of an allegation of a violation of policy.
So you're not aware specifically of any allegation that the F-350 policy was violated?
Same objections.
No.
Nobody ever made that allegation as far as you know?
No.
Let's turn to page 71 of the document you have in front of you. That would be the incident investigation report. Do you have that page in front of you?
Yes.
Danny Medina told detectives that he could clearly see one of the deputies punching Mr. Silva when he was down. Isn't that true?
Lacks foundation, calls for speculation, document speaks for itself.
Or is that your understanding?
Go ahead and answer. Same objection.
Can you refer me to the location on that page, please?
I'm looking specifically at the fourth full paragraph down, at the end of that paragraph.
Okay.
So is it your understanding that witness Danny Medina told detectives or investigators that he could clearly see one of the deputies pinning the suspect down was punching him?
I see that he made that statement to them, yes.
In terms of the County of Kern and its Sheriff's Office's investigation into this incident, no finding was ever made as to whether Mr. Silva had been punched by any deputy?
Correct.
Some of the deputies claimed in this case that Mr. Silva's arms were flailing during the incident. Is that right?
Lacks foundation, calls for speculation. Go ahead and answer if you know.
If you can refer me to that section. I can say that I know they said he was moving his arms. I don't recall the specific use of the word flailing.
When you reviewed this document, did you notice whether any of the statements by witnesses was inconsistent with any of the statements given by the officers?
It's vague, ambiguous, and overbroad. You can answer it if you're able.
Yes, there's witness inconsistencies in all cases.
But the County of Kern and the Sheriff's Office never made any findings as to what was correct and what was incorrect in terms of the inconsistencies.
Correct.
One of the witnesses to this incident, who was a private security officer, told detectives that the incident appeared to be excessive to him. Isn't that true?
Well, it's